Good afternoon. Well, earlier you saw the ANC leader, President Cyril Ramaphosa, outlining the ANC's election manifesto, making big promises to create jobs, to improve governance, to change the way things, like the way that water is being managed. The official ANC manifesto that's been published today also says it will take steps to ensure its leaders behave ethically and work towards resolving the country's problems. Over the last 2 weeks, you would have seen the huge fight between the ANC and the DA over cadre deployment, and of course the release of the ANC's cadre deployment meeting records and WhatsApp conversations. Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast is a political analyst. He joins us now. Professor, good afternoon to you. The ANC says it's going to ensure effective leadership, that it's going to ensure it has ethical leadership. We have this huge fight about cadre deployment. How do you think the cadre deployment fight is playing out in the minds of voters?
Well, Stephen, the ANC looks up to China as a case in point, or as a model of a development. And I'm citing China on purpose because China has been able to reduce poverty on a large scale and has been able to grow its economy. And China employs cadre deployment. It uses it, but it also believes in a meritocracy whereby people are appointed on merit. One of the reasons why cadre deployment has not worked in our own backyard is because the ANC is not deploying the best of the best. The ANC is not deploying people on merit. The ANC, if a faction wins a conference of the ANC, then that faction will purge other people who are in government and appoints its own people, not on merit. So that has been a challenge in our country. And as a result of that, cadre deployment has failed. So the DA has taken a strategic advantage of that by punching some holes in terms of the policy of the ANC on cadre deployment. Not to say that cadre deployment in theory is a bad thing, because politics and administration are like two sides of the same coin. You know, when you come into power as a political party, at a strategic level, you want to appoint people who understand the thinking of the party in terms of what the party seeks to do. But the ANC has done the exact opposite of that by not appointing the best of the best.
So to put it another way, let me ask you this question. Is cadre deployment good for governance or bad for governance? And I think the way it's been painted in the debate we've had over the last 30 years in our country, really, is that cadre deployment is bad for governance. What you're saying is not in China.
Stephen, I support professionalization of the public service. People at middle management level, at lower level, must be appointed on merit, but there are strategic positions. I think at the level of DG, in those senior positions, at senior management level, you have to have people who understand the policies of your party. You come to power with a mandate. Therefore, you need bureaucrats who are going to assist you in pursuit of your objective realization. But then you need to appoint those people on merit. And I don't think the ANC has been doing that. The ANC appoints people by and large on party loyalty only, not on the basis of their skill. I mean, there have been people who have come out forward denouncing also cadre deployment. Maybe they don't call it cadre deployment in the DA, but the DA does the same thing. So there are also some double standards. I'm not saying that two wrongs make a right. I'm just saying that there is no political party, in my view, that will come into power and not appoint people who are loyal to the party on the basis of their qualifications and skills.
Well, I was going to ask you about the DA. I mean, there's been plenty of evidence that's emerged from, two people who used to be in the DA, Musi Maimani's one, Bongani Beloy's another, who say that the DA indulged or that used cadre deployment. From what you can see now, what the ANC and the DA were doing, I mean, is it the same thing, or are there big differences between what the ANC was doing and what the DA was doing, or is doing?
My reading of the situation is that I'm not a politician, so I'm not partisan. But my reading of the situation is that, the DA tends to run its administration better. Why do I say that? If you look at the performance of the municipalities which are run by the DA, they tend to get clean audits. Of course, if you go to Cape Town, for instance, you still have the binary between the haves and the have-nots. But I think they tend to appoint people on merit, maybe not all the time, but in majority of the time, I think people are appointed on merit than what is happening in most municipalities which are ran by the ANC. My reading of the situation is that the majority of the municipalities which are ran by the ANC, they are falling apart because they don't get clean audits, largely because of lack of skills.
The ANC says in its manifesto it's going to make sure that things like water provision and potholes are fixed. I'm going to put electricity to one side, Professor, because it's just such a different conversation. But if we just look at water and potholes, right, do you think that cadre deployment can happen and that water and potholes can be fixed? I mean, you need to improve governance to fix those things. Can the ANC improve its governance through improving its cadre deployment?
You know, Stephen, you are citing important issues. The issue of water shortage, that has been caused by not appointing the right people. I believe that you cannot critique contemporary specificities without invoking history, but then you cannot blame Uncle Jan van Riebeeck for shortage of water in this day and age. It's got nothing to do with that. It has to do with the wrong appointments that have been made. And unfortunately, cadre deployment tends to be cited because of that, because it is not done properly. But I think if it can be done properly, it would assist the ANC in terms of achieving its goals of promoting development for the majority. And also, one of the things that also creates a scope for corruption to flourish is the appointment of wrong service providers. No wonder some roles are not built properly.
I mean, within all of this, I think one of the things that's interesting around the ANC is that it makes a lot of promises in its manifesto. I mean, that's what a manifesto is for. To do that, it needs to actually manage governance better. And I mean, I'm sure you remember, Professor, you know, if we were listening at the ANC's conference just 18 months ago, a year ago now, at the end of 2022, and I mean, people there were desperate about the weakness of the state. So what do we need to do first? Do we need to fix potholes, or do we need to strengthen the state to fix potholes? And that takes us to a whole new territory of whether we can have a development state in South Africa that would really actually work.
Stephen, we will never achieve our objective realization of a developmental state so long as we don't have a disciplined bureaucracy. Again, I can cite China as a case in point because it's one of the Asian tigers. It has been able to grow its economy over the past years, successfully so, year in and year out, with the exception of late because it has been dealt with a blow by COVID-19. But before that, you know, China has had good economic growth. But in our context, I mean, people normally come to work late, they leave early, there are no consequences. We don't have a disciplined a bureaucracy. No wonder the government is not able to promote development for the majority on a large scale. So to pursue this agenda of a developmental stage, we have to have a disciplined a bureaucracy. So the ANC makes a lot of commitments that it wants to promote ethical leadership, but at the same time, if you look at corruption perception index, our government falls short in terms of fighting against the corruption. The findings of the Zondo Commission are still gathering dust, which signifies that government doesn't take the fight against corruption seriously.
So I was going to come to that ethical leadership. I mean, because the President promising today, again, ethical leadership. And I put a question to you, I put to Professor Keribona Pakgo a few moments ago, which is that if you look at what's happening in the ANC, it seems, from what I can tell, at least at this stage, and this is happening sort of behind closed doors, that we have a situation where people against whom findings were made at the Zondo Commission are probably going to be able to represent the party in Parliament and provincial legislatures. So, yes, there's a promise of ethical leadership, but these people, who the evidence shows were not ethical in the past, are going to be back where they are now.
The first thing that comes to the mind of the ANC is the ANC not the country. No wonder they've put those findings on hold, because they say that if you implement those findings, you will divide the ANC. But then corruption is posing a serious threat to our country, because our economy is not growing the way it should have, largely because of the way it has been mismanaged. So I don't get the sense that the ANC is on a mission to fight against the corruption. The worst part of it is that in the build-up to the Nazareth conference, President Ramaphosa came across to be taking a stand against corruption, but we are falling short. And I'm citing examples of that. I mean, if you look at, the state of affairs of our SOEs, they're not doing well. If you look at the performance of municipalities, they're not doing well. It's a mess.
Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, always good to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir, on a Saturday afternoon. Do appreciate it.